The forest was burning with smoke and chaos. Trees glowed orange through the mist as Roman soldiers vanished into the fog, their outlines flickering like ghosts in the firelight. Spears cut through the rain in long arcs, striking with deadly speed. Roman shields rose in desperate defense, their edges splintering beneath the storm of blows. Silhouettes of warriors clashed amid the thunder and mud, their cries muffled by the roar of wind and rain. Above them, dark storm clouds rolled over the forest canopy, turning daylight into twilight. Arrows streaked through flashes of lightning, their flight illuminated for a heartbeat before they struck home, each strike part of a godlike fury unleashed from the heavens. Centurions shouted orders, their voices drowned by the storm. The rain poured in torrents, drenching every man, blurring faces, until all were unrecognizable, soldier and savage alike, swallowed by the chaos of the forest. The battlefield was a sea of water and blood. Streams of red mixed with mud beneath shattered Roman armor. Golden eagles, once proud standards of empire, trembled under the weight of the storm, their metal dulled and dripping, feathers from fallen plumes stuck to the ground, soaked and broken. The disciplined Roman lines had fractured into scattered pockets of men fighting for their lives among the trees. Broken shields lay half buried in the sludge, and spears jutted from the earth like gravestones. The fog thickened, rolling low and heavy, turning the world into a pale grey dream of terror. A wounded soldier crawled through the mire, dragging himself toward a fallen comrade, his fingers slipping in the mud as he reached out. The mist closed around them like a curtain, hiding the dying from the living. When the storm reached its height, the rain fell sideways, driving leaves and ashes into the air. A torn crimson banner, once bright as fire, sank slowly into the mud, the weight of the water pulling it down. Storm winds howled through the shattered spears, bending trees and scattering embers from dying fires. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the noise faded, the rain eased, the forest fell silent. Smoke drifted through the pines, the fog grew thick once more, curling between the trunks. The battlefield lay empty, no soldiers, no voices, only the whisper of rain on leaves. The trees stood dark and still, watching, as if nothing had ever happened. The forest had taken back its silence. It started long before the first spear was thrown. Rome already ruled most of the known world, from the burning deserts of North Africa to the cold grey rivers of northern Europe. But beyond the Rhine River, that broad restless boundary marking the empire's edge, there stretched a land that the Romans called Germania. To them it was not a nation, but an untamed mystery, a place of fog and forest, where maps faded and reason failed. Imagine endless woods without cities, without marble roads or temples of stone, only pine and wind and warriors who moved like shadows between the trees. To Rome, Germania was chaos. To the Germanic tribes who lived there, Rome was a giant that never stopped marching. For years, Roman legions had crossed the Rhine every summer. They built wooden forts and stone roads, forcing the tribes to pay taxes and bend the knee. When Rome spoke of peace, it meant obedience. When it offered civilization, it meant control. Villages burned, chiefs were exiled, and the land itself began to change under Roman axes. In the year 7 AD, Emperor Augustus decided to make Germania a true province of the empire. To bring order to this wilderness, he sent a man he trusted above all others, Publius Quinctilius Varus. Varus was no brute soldier. He was an administrator, calm and educated, a believer in the power of Roman law. He brought judges, clerks and tax collectors, confident that even these wild tribes would one day thank Rome for teaching them peace. He believed that laws and order could tame the forest as easily as swords had tamed cities. But among the Germans was a man who understood Rome better than any of his people. His name was Arminius, or Herman in his native tongue, a prince of the Cherus tribe. Years earlier, he had been taken to Rome as a hostage, a common practice to ensure his tribe's loyalty. There in the heart of the empire, Arminius learned everything the Romans could teach. He studied their language, their laws, their tactics. He fought beside their legions and earned the citizenship of the empire that had once chained him. Rome had shaped him into the perfect soldier, and in doing so had armed him with the knowledge to destroy it. When he returned home, Arminius found his world slowly vanishing beneath Roman rule. Patrols marched through his forests. Roman judges ruled his people. The tribes that had once stood together now fought each other, divided by bribes and fear. Some had bent the knee to Rome, trading freedom for safety. Others resisted and were burned for it. Rome called it civilization. Arminius saw it as slow death. Yet he hid his hatred well. Outwardly, he remained the perfect ally. He dined at Varus's table, spoke in polished Latin, and wore the armor of a Roman officer. Varus trusted him completely, seeing in him a loyal friend and the ideal bridge between Rome and the wild tribes of the north. But beneath the calm surface, Arminius was building something far greater, a secret alliance. He moved quietly from tribe to tribe, whispering that Rome was strong in armor but weak in soul, that the forest itself could fight for them if they stood together. One chieftain at a time, he turned fear into fury. The fire was spreading under the leaves, unseen, waiting for the wind that would set the world ablaze. He rode from tribe to tribe, whispering that Rome was strong in armor but weak in spirit, that the forest itself could rise and fight for them if only they stood together. His words were quiet but powerful, carried by wind and firelight from one longhouse to another. The chiefs listened, some doubtful, some fearful, but each one could feel the pulse of truth in his voice. Rome had taken too much for too long. One chieftain at a time, the whispers became oaths, and oaths became vows sealed with blood and drink. Across the valleys and riverbanks, across the hidden glades where fires burned low and secret, a quiet unity began to form. The fire was spreading beneath the leaves, unseen yet unstoppable. By the summer of 9 AD, the trap was ready. A false rebellion flared far to the east, carefully staged to draw Varus and his legions away from safety. Villages were burned, messages sent, and scouts returned with tales of uprising. It was bait, simple, brilliant, and irresistible. Arminius, still wearing the face of Rome's loyal scout, rode beside Varus and calmly advised the governor to take a shortcut through the Teutoburg Forest, a sprawling wilderness of marsh and oak and pine that no Roman army had ever dared to enter in full formation. Varus agreed without hesitation. To him it was just another campaign to enforce Roman order on restless tribes. To Arminius, it was destiny, the moment he had been born and remade for, and somewhere among those silent pines, history waited with its blade drawn. That summer, the Roman army marched again. 3 legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, advanced eastward under Governor Publius Quinctilius Varus. Nearly 20,000 soldiers followed him, along with thousands of camp followers, slaves, and traders. Long lines of wagons creaked beneath the weight of supplies, gold, and the tools of empire. The Roman column stretched for miles, a moving wall of discipline and power. It was not a small expedition, but a march of confidence, a display of Rome's unshakable belief in its own invincibility. The soldiers left their strongholds near the Rhine, crossing into the dark heart of Germania with banners raised and standards gleaming. The air smelled of pine and rain, drums beat in rhythm to their steps, and the iron of their armor flashed like a river of light beneath the overcast sky. At Varus's side rode Arminius, calm and composed, speaking softly of the safest routes and of tribes ready to aid them. His tone was steady, his loyalty unshaken, or so it seemed. He told Varus of a shortcut through the dense green depths of the Teutoburg Forest, a route that would save days of travel and bring them swiftly to the rebellious lands. The forest, he said, was quiet, unthreatening, watched over by friendly tribes. Varus trusted him without doubt. At first, the path seemed harmless enough. The road was firm and broad, built years earlier by Roman engineers who had carved through the wilderness with saws and iron. The soldiers joked as they marched, their laughter echoing through the trees. The rhythm of their steps was perfect, their spirits high, their discipline unbroken. Shields gleamed in the grey light, standards waved proudly. But as they pushed deeper into the woods, the air began to change. The light grew dimmer, and the scent of moss and decay thickened. The trees pressed closer together, ancient trunks rising like pillars in a temple of shadows. The canopy above blotted out the sky, and the once wide road narrowed into a trail of mud. Branches hung low, brushing against helmets. The air turned cold and wet. The rain began quietly, a fine drizzle that soaked through every cloak and tunic. The ground grew soft, wagons bogged down, and horses stumbled. The engineers struggled to repair the trail, but their tools sank into the muck. Still, Varus ordered the march to continue. He had been told the rebellion was urgent, a fire that needed to be extinguished before it spread. He trusted Arminius. So when Arminius suggested that he ride ahead to rally friendly tribes and secure the path, Varus agreed. The governor nodded, weary but confident. Arminius saluted in the Roman manner, then turned his horse and disappeared into the trees, his figure swallowed by mist. The sound of hooves faded into the rain until there was nothing left but the rhythmic creak of wagons and the trudging of tired feet. The legions pressed on. The forest seemed to close behind them like a gate. Hour after hour, the sound of marching echoed strangely beneath the canopy, distorted and hollow, as if the trees themselves were listening. The soldiers muttered that the air felt wrong, heavy with something unseen. The rain fell harder, hammering against helmets and armor, and visibility shrank to a few paces. When night came, the army made camp on uneven, sodden ground. The men were restless. The forest loomed too close, its shapes moving in the torchlight. Fires refused to burn properly, sputtering in the wet air and throwing only smoke. The rain hissed endlessly on leather and iron. Some men swore they heard horns deep in the darkness, long mournful notes that rose and fell like distant thunder. Others laughed it off, saying it was only the wind, or wolves calling through the night. Inside his tent, Varus wrote reports for Rome. He imagined the coming day would be another slow march through difficult terrain, exhausting but manageable. Outside, however, beyond the glow of Roman firelight, hundreds of other fires were already burning, their flames low and hidden between the trees. They were not Roman. The forest was alive now, breathing and watching. It was awake, and it was waiting. Morning came slowly, if it could be called morning at all. A thick grey mist smothered the forest, clinging to every branch and trunk. The sun could barely pierce it. The Roman column stretched in a long winding line, its armor dulled by rain, its banners hanging limp. The sound of iron boots on wet ground was swallowed by the fog. Voices called and answered, growing fainter as the distance between units widened. Varus rode near the front, his cloak soaked and heavy, his expression weary but composed. To him, it was another day, another march, another step toward ending the revolt. Behind him, the banners of the 17th Legion dragged low, their colors dim. The men moved in silence, too tired to speak. Then through the fog came a sound, a deep, throaty blast from a horn, one no Roman had ever heard. It came from the right. Then another answered from the left, then another behind. The echoes multiplied, rolling through the mist like thunder. The forest erupted. From the trees above, and the ridges around them, javelins came raining down. The first rank staggered, horses screamed, men raised shields in panic as spears struck wood and flesh. The fog turned to chaos, and the Teutoburg Forest, silent for centuries, began to roar. They came out of nowhere, from above, from the shadows, from the green itself. One moment the forest was still, except for the sound of rain, and the next it erupted with movement and death. Spears and stones came hurtling from the darkness of the trees. Shields rose in panic. Horses screamed and kicked, their riders thrown into the mud. A centurion shouted for his men to form up, to build the familiar wall of shields that had saved Rome countless times before, but there was no room. The trees pressed too close, their roots and trunks twisting like barriers. The narrow trail that had once seemed a road was now a trap. The forest itself had become a cage, and inside it, Rome was suffocating. The ambush had begun. From the ridge to the right, Germanic warriors surged forward barefoot, their bodies slick with rain, their faces painted in streaks of lime and mud. They howled as they charged, their voices echoing like thunder through the trees. Their long hair whipped behind them as they vanished between the trunks, striking with terrifying speed, disappearing before the Romans could retaliate. They moved like spirits born from the forest, using every hollow and rise of ground as a weapon. Every path that seemed open led only deeper into confusion. They knew every stream, every tangle of roots, every slope that could break a man's leg or overturn a wagon. Varus tried to regain control. He shouted above the noise, his voice hoarse from rain and fear. Close ranks. Keep moving. Don't stop. But his commands were swallowed by the chaos. The clash of steel, the screams of men and horses, the drumming of rain on armor. It was all one roaring, endless sound. The wagons jammed in the mud. Horses reared and fell, crushing men beneath them. Drivers screamed as they tried to free the wheels, but the road was gone, buried under a swamp of rainwater and blood. There was no formation left, no order, yet the Romans, trained for discipline even in the face of death, fought as best they could. Small groups clustered together, shields locked, blades flashing in the dim light. They pushed back against the unseen enemy, their lines collapsing and reforming again and again as arrows and spears rained down from the treetops. The sound of impact was everywhere, metal on wood, steel on bone, the wet, sickening thud of javelins sinking into flesh. Men slipped on the bodies of their comrades. The smell of blood and rain mixed into a single choking mist. High on a slope, overlooking the carnage, Arminius watched. Gone was the calm Roman officer in polished armor. He now stood as a creature of the forest, his body wrapped in a wolfskin cloak, his hair wet and tangled, his face marked with streaks of ash and rain. His eyes were hard, unblinking. Around him, the tribal chiefs shouted orders in harsh voices that rolled through the mist, like the growls of beasts. They struck not in frenzy, but with precision, cutting through the Roman column at its weakest points. It was strategy, cold and deliberate. The very tactics Rome had once taught him, now turned against them. By midday, hundreds of Romans were dead. The survivors pressed forward, dragging the wounded through the mud, stepping over the fallen, their armor dented and their faces gray with exhaustion. The forest seemed to close in around them, swallowing the road, erasing direction. The rain fell harder, washing blood into the soil until the ground itself turned red. Every step forward felt like walking through quicksand. Every mile was another battle. When night finally came, the storm did not stop. The survivors found a patch of high ground and built a crude camp. No fires burned properly. The wood was too wet, the air too heavy. Smoke curled weakly into the rain. The men huddled together under soaked cloaks, their eyes wide, their breaths shallow. No one sang the old marching songs. No one laughed. They spoke little, for every sound seemed to echo too far into the dark. Some swore they still heard horns in the distance, not the calls of Rome, but deep, guttural blasts that came and went like ghostly warnings. Others pretended not to hear, whispering instead that it was just the wind, or wolves hunting in the night. But everyone knew. The forest was alive, and it was watching them. Varus sat in silence inside his tent, drenched and cold. He wrote nothing now. The parchment was too wet, the ink running black across the page. His mind ran in circles, refusing to grasp the truth. He had trusted Arminius. He had led 3 legions into a place that no army should have entered. Still, he told himself, dawn would bring relief. The tribes would scatter. The storm would pass. Rome always endured. But the forest had already decided otherwise. When the second day came, the rain did not stop. It thickened, falling in heavy sheets that blurred the world to grey. Every drop seemed to strike with weight, as if the heavens themselves had joined the ambush. The Romans trudged forward again, their armor blackened by mud, their red cloaks soaked and heavy as stone. The disciplined ranks of the empire were gone, replaced by a line of weary, shivering men who no longer looked like soldiers but shadows. The forest seemed endless, each hill and valley identical, each tree another barrier. The path twisted in circles, leading nowhere. Varus ordered scouts ahead, desperate to find the open ground beyond the trees, but none returned. Hours passed. The forest gave back no sound except the constant rain and the creak of leather straps. That was when Varus finally understood what he had refused to believe. Arminius was gone, not lost, not dead, but transformed. The man he had once called ally had become the spirit of this forest, its commander and its fury. Germania no longer belonged to Rome, and along the march, the Germanic warriors struck again, never from the same place twice. They came and vanished like the storm itself, unseen, unrelenting, and merciless.